Hello there. Welcome to the 65th episode of Under the Radar. I'm very pleased to be back today. I'm excited to cover the release that I'm covering today as well. As far as Slave to Servant is concerned, I don't have anything new to broadcast at the moment, but I am working on some things. I will talk about that at the end of the episode, but I'd just like to get into today's episode. And before I start talking about today's release, I would like to point you back in time to a past episode number 26, where I covered the Thick Oil compilation put out by Thick Records. Not only is it a great place to start in regard to what I'm covering today, but it is also got an entire history of Thick Records. And I know that recently I did cover another release that Thick put out. It was Hanalei. And I'll be also covering another awesome band in the future that I technically have covered in the past at the very beginning. And they put out a record on Thick Records as well, a band called The Brokedowns. Love them. I'm excited to cover that record in particular. But alas, I must get back into what we're talking about today, which is today's release. Another compilation album on CD put out by Thick Records in Chicago. And this one was put out in 2006. It was recorded by Lance Reynolds once again, who did all the engineering for the Thick Oil comp in a oil refinery, I believe is where that was. And this one, following the same tradition as the last comp, it was recorded at the Argyle Room in Chicago, which I believe is an old barber shop that they turned into a studio. Now, if I'm wrong about that, feel free to correct me in the comments. But anyhow, there were a number of amazing bands on this release. Too many great bands, once again, to even cover all of the material on it. But I'm going to try to do my best and point out some that I guess more so relate to the scene that I was playing in at the time, and kind of relates back to this series to some bands that I've covered in the past as well. I will say, before I start covering bands, the band Colossal has the best song on this comp. I think that it's one of their best songs ever. It was, I believe, the last song they ever recorded as a band, and I will cover that one coming up here. But I think I'm going to just start at the top. But I did want to mention that just the Colossal song alone makes this CD worth owning. So, all right, from the top. First band on this release is a band that I have wanted to talk about in the past, and I know I've briefly mentioned them. I think I mentioned them recently in the Show Off episode, and I think I've probably had some footage at the beginning in the first episode. I think I might have had some footage of one of their CDs. They were the first band to sign to Drive Through Records. They were quite successful in putting out bands that didn't actually really have a following, and kind of developed bands more so from ground zero instead of maybe a traditional way of signing up a band that had sold like 30,000 copies of their latest record or something, on an indie label. Anyhow, before I play the song that's on this comp, I want to mention something, because recently I was reminded of this, and I just so happened to be at a swap shop just picking up some DVDs a week or two ago, and I came across one that involves this band. And Alistair was one of the first bands in the scene, I guess, before our wave of bands, but they were also in it as well, but they were touring nationally, internationally, on a label that a lot of bands wanted to sign to from our scene. When I think about bands like Fall Out Boy, right, like Take This to Your Grave and all of those things, those bands hadn't popped off yet at the point that I want to talk about. I want to rewind before this comp. So in 2004, this was around the time that Fall Out Boy had put out their B-sides, acoustic EP that I had covered in the past. Anyhow, Alistair, I remember at the Knights of Columbus there was a release show, or it was like a stay-up show, like I think it was a sleepover with Alistair. Like there was a themed night that Abby Valentine at Action Heights had put together. I wish I still had the flyer for it. I know I had received a flyer for it. But anyway, the band Alistair made it into this movie. It's a kind of a teeny bopper movie called Sleepover. And not only were they the band that was featured in the film, I guess this has kind of garnered somewhat of a cult following amongst the people of its age. I have actually yet to see it, but I picked it up regardless because I thought it was cool because Alistair was in it. And also, the soundtrack included 3 Alistair songs. Technically, one was just a Gabe song, but I believe it was later re-recorded as Alistair. Anyhow, there's a cover of an Oingo Boingo song on here called We Close Our Eyes, and that's on the soundtrack along with 2 other Alistair cuts, and a ton of songs from Last Stop Suburbia on Drive-Thru Records are in that film as well that didn't make the soundtrack to this film. I wanted to mention it because I know I haven't done any sort of breakdown on Alistair, and I know that they're OGs, you know, as far as in the pop punk realm of Chicago. And not only that, but they were also featured on the Magnetic Curses compilation that Thick put out. I think I mentioned that back in that episode 26. Anyway, so I know that was kind of a long rant, but I do think that Alistair deserved a little bit more of a spiel here since I haven't covered any of their releases in the past. So this song is an exclusive song called Walking the Plank. Great punk rock song. I don't think that song has been featured on any of Alistair's releases besides this exclusive comp here. So if you do like that song, you should definitely get yourself a copy of this. Also wanted to mention something that's always bothered me, and I've never asked this to anybody else, but at the top of the comp, where it has the bands listed, there is a bottom row where one of the bands has been crossed out, and I just wonder what band was supposed to be on here that got crossed off the roster. That's boggled my mind for a while. Anyhow, let's go ahead and get into another band. This next band that I'm going to cover has a song on here. They're a band called Cougars. I know that it's got ex-members of Hot Stove Jimmy, which was a ska band in the 90s that was on Jump Up Records, and I don't know what other ex-members are in Cougars, but what I will say is that they were a very rad band on Go-Kart Records, and they sounded a lot like Rocket from the Crypt, in my opinion. When I listen to this song in particular, that's definitely what I hear in it. So without further ado, here is Cougars, We Blog the Hardest.
Inside my face
rad band. I think that song is also exclusive to this release. I don't think it's on any of their Go-Kart albums or the Thick EP they put out. So now we're going to get into some familiar territory. These bands that I'm going to be playing you here, the next 4 are bands that have been covered in this series already, which I think is quite cool. Obviously, Thick Records thought they were notable bands, just as I did myself in this series. So this band here, little old band I've covered twice in the series, a band called Split Habit. Awesome power pop punk band with an exclusive song called West Palm Sand. Very catchy tune. I really liked the direction that Split Habit was going. It would have been interesting to hear another record by them, and I think that song probably was more in the vein that they were going. Yeah, sad to see that band go and not do any more stuff, but happy that song is on this compilation. Now the next band I'm going to cover, I've already mentioned them at the beginning here, and I've covered 2 of their releases as well. A band called Colossal. And as I said before at the beginning of this spiel, this is the best song on the comp. As far as I'm concerned, I think it is very unique. And being a huge fan of Colossal, watching them play this one live, knowing that this song is exclusive and was, I think, the last official studio track that they ever made before they broke up. I'm just going to let this song speak for itself. Here is Colossal with Give Me a Tropical Contact High.
Last night, I asked him to break the news gently. His body's drifted away, evidently. If you can't walk away, in the surf you'll stay. Write this down. If they insist you move faster, an abacus can assess the disaster. Margins at full are just obstacles. Surf, you'll stay.
such an amazing song. I never get tired of listening to that one, and I can only wonder what the band would have gone on to do had they made another full length. I think that they were really onto something very unique, and will always be one of my favorite Chicago bands. Not unlike one of the next bands that I'm going to cover, a band that I've covered one of their albums in this series, a band called Ryan's Hope. This song is actually a re-recorded version of a song from the album that I covered in this series, off of the album The Trials of Recession, but it is re-recorded by Lance Reynolds. It sounds pretty rad. I like what the drum quality came out as opposed to on the first full length. And I didn't cover this particular song in that episode with Ryan's Hope, so here is Ryan's Hope with Condemning Race.
We all have to let go of learning the path they've chosen for us. Withdraw myself from this void. Desire has overwhelmed this heart of mine. I can't turn back now. I've already found the perfect words, but I know there's only one truth. Until eternity comes crashing head on into memories that others had arranged for us. Until the end, here we stay. Withdraw myself from this the way. Desire has overwhelmed this heart of mine. I can't turn back now. I've never found the perfect words, but I know there's only one way. Until eternity comes crashing head on into memories that others had arranged for us. Until the end, here we stand. Yeah!
Great rendition of that song. It's always cool to hear exclusive versions of songs, even if they're songs that you know from like the record. It's cool that they re-recorded that tune, and I believe that would have been right before the band recorded their second full length, Apocalypse in Increments. Let's go ahead and move on to the final band that I'm going to cover. And as hard as it was to decide tracks to play you and cover, there are so many amazing bands on this comp, and you should definitely check it out. I do want to list them off really quickly before I cover the last band here. Much the Same is on here, and the only reason I didn't play their song is because it was re-recorded for a release that they did with Nitro Records, and I'm going to be covering that song and album in the future, so I didn't want to spoil it and play it here. The Killing Tree had an amazing song on here with backup vocals provided by Emily from Holy Roman Empire. Holy Roman Empire also had a song on here. Exploding Makeup has a song on here. The Methadones, Thick Records' own, had an amazing song on here called Waiting. And Horace Pinker was on here. The Bomb, Break the Silence, which did used to feature Dan Precision from 88 Fingers Louie and Rise Against. Although this was when he had left the band, they had an exclusive song on this comp. And whoever the crossed out band was on here, I wonder who it was. I don't know. Would have been cool to know who that was. If anybody knows who the crossed out band on top here is, I would love to know. So we will go ahead and get into this last band, another band that I've covered in this series, a band called the Felix Culpa. And this was before the band signed to No Sleep Records. It was after a couple, Commitment I covered in this series, and then they did an EP, and then they added a member as a 4-piece instead of a trio, and they signed to No Sleep Records, put out a record called Sever Your Roots. This song was re-recorded for that album, but this exclusive version by Lance Reynolds is only available on the Hair compilation here by Thick Records. This Felix Culpa song is called Escape to the Mountain, Lest Thou Be Consumed. excellent song, excellent band. Just some great songs on here. I recommend going on Discogs and picking up a copy if you can. I think that, again, that Colossal song is ridiculous. You should, if you're a fan of them, you should get it anyway. But yeah, you can probably find a copy or two on Discogs. I don't know where else, as this label is now defunct. But they put out some great releases. Like I said, I'll be covering one more release by Thick Records in the future here, which I'm excited about. And that should wrap things up here on this comp. But in other news, I am working on a music video for Hindsight 2020 with some buddies. Just kind of plotting out the release for Escape Babylon and the show that we're going to play in Tennessee. And really nothing new developing at the moment, but I'm just going to keep cranking out episodes and be dropping the Escape Babylon music video very soon. But I'm just trying to stay creative. And I just saw the Pixies for my first time, age 40, and they were awesome. That was an amazing show. It was very inspiring to watch them. It was them and Modest Mouse, and I have to say I'm not really a big fan of Modest Mouse. Not really my cup of tea. But what I did love about Modest Mouse and the Pixies was that they were both live. There were no backing tracks, as bands today seem to all have backing tracks for the most part, from what I'm seeing, and play to a click and all this. And while that does take talent and it's nice, it was just awesome to see bands plug in and play, and you get what you get. You know, it was very cool, and Pixies were very good. So anyway, I will stop ranting about that. My next episode is going to be the last posthumous release by one of my bands. I'm excited to cover that release. So I'll be back real soon, and I just want to say thank you for your time.